Now, yesterday afternoon, I guess this would have been earlier in the day, our immigration minister, Sean Fraser, made a fairly substantial announcement with respect to Canadian immigration limits, or quotas, if you want to call them, over the next 3 years, which by the time we get to 2025 will be an additional 500,000 immigrants invited to come to Canada. Now, I'm going to use this as the basis for a question a little later in the show because I'm sure there are very mixed opinions on this. I've been reading some of the comments to his announcement. But, you know, here in the province of Quebec, we're obviously in a bit of a unique position, right? Because, you know, the premier here has his own plan. That limit has been set at 50,000 now for a while. That was an increase, right? We were actually down, I think, at one point to 40,000.
Yeah, but we have a labor crisis.
We have a labor crisis here. There's a labor crisis across the country. Is it unique to Quebec? No. But what does it mean for Quebec when Quebec wants to make its own decisions vis-a-vis immigration and not just go ahead, you know, willy-nilly and follow what the federal government wants to do? And that is the case. VÉRONIQUE PROULX is CEO of the Manufacturers and Exporters Association of Quebec. She's on the line right now. Ms. PROULX, thanks for being here this afternoon. Let me just ask right off the top, with respect to that announcement, right, by the federal minister yesterday of so many more immigrants for this country, how did you react to that?
Well, we reacted very positively. We're very pleased with the fact that the federal government has increased immigration threshold, and this is something we had been asking nationally through our association, Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters, and our hope is that the provincial government will follow and it will, at his turn, increase immigration levels. So
Natasha mentioned, you know, with respect to Quebec, of course, we're in a different situation here. I'm curious, so you have a national association as well. Is the problem across the country as bad as it is here?
It's worse in Quebec. We've seen it in the past. The number of, just in manufacturing, Quebec has 40% of vacant positions across Canada. So the situation is worse in Quebec, first because of the demographics. There are more people leaving the labor market than people coming in. And second, Quebec is the only province to have its own immigration levels. So it does limit our capacity to have access to the workers that we need.
And so you said that you're hoping that Quebec and Premier François Legault are going to kind of play along and accept these kinds of numbers, but it's pretty clear that François Legault is not going to. So now what?
Well, we're going to continue. You know, labor shortages are affecting manufacturing, of course. We have close to near 32,000 vacant positions in manufacturing only. And last year, we released a study that showed that manufacturers had lost $18 billion over the past 2 years because of labor shortages. So, and month after month, year after year, the number of vacant positions increases in manufacturing, and it limits our capacity to grow. So, but it does not affect only manufacturing. It affects the public sector, health, education. I think that at some point there will be no other solution than to turn towards immigration to enable Quebecers to have access to the services, the products that they need.
So, but how big, you're on the ground talking to manufacturers, you've traveled, I'm sure, across the province. The issue of language that we brought up off the top, which seems to be holding Quebec back, at least that's the Premier's decision. What do you hear from people who are the ones hiring, from employers with respect to language? Is it an issue?
It's not an issue. First, I'd start by saying, you know, everybody agrees that French is important, and it's important for newcomers to learn French. So that's I would say that the baseline. After that, a lot of manufacturers do welcome foreign temporary workers who do not speak French at all. So they're au Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, au Bas-Saint-Laurent, in Quebec, in Sherbrooke. And as soon as they come in, we start French classes because they need to have a minimum of French to be able to follow health and safety measures, but also to be able to connect with their workers in their community. So we're already helping workers at new immigrants that arrive in Quebec to learn French, either within our plants or they go to courses that are offered outside of work. But this is something that has been in place in years and that has been working. And for manufacturers, in our perspective, the fact that they speak French or not isn't an issue because they will be able to work and eventually they will be able to integrate. And I even had a manufacturer in one of the further regions who said, you know, if they come here and they don't speak French, they will learn French because French is all we speak. So eventually, after some time, they pick it up and they're able to integrate within the community.
So then, given that Legault had said, you know, we can't take more immigrants, that it would be akin to suicide for the province, and 50,000 is the max, where would you like to see that number at?
We've been asking for 90,000 immigrants for a while now, over the next few years, because when you look at the needs of the labor market in manufacturing, but all sectors, clearly there are not enough people right now, and we can see that over the next 10 years, there will be more people leaving the labor market than people coming in. So if we want to sustain our manufacturing capacity in the different regions in Quebec, we need more immigrants. And right now, what the Quebec government has been doing, which is helping us to a certain extent, is to increase the level of foreign temporary workers that are coming in. So these people are coming in on visas of 2 years or 3 years. Sometimes they're alone, sometimes they come with their family, and these people have access to French classes, they have access to public services. If they're here with their kids, they have access to schools, to daycares. So you need more capacity to be able to welcome them in the regions. So the capacity has to be built because they're coming in as temporary workers. So in the end, it comes up the same as if they were permanent immigrants, in the sense that we need more housing, public transit, places in schools and daycares, and French classes once again.
So, that's a pretty wide gap between the 90,000 that you say you could use and the 50,000 that the government is offering.
Well, and the 113,000 that the government is proposing if we do our 23% equal to our demographic weight in the country.
So is there a midway here that you think you can convince the government here provincially to understand that or to go ahead with your numbers?
I don't know if we'll be able to convince the government overall over the overall numbers, but what we have been suggesting to the government for manufacturing is to look at those foreign temporary workers that are right now in the region. So it's much more than 50,000 because once again, they are here for visas for a period of 2 or 3 years. And this would be to give them access to a fast track to permanent immigration if they do qualify, because they are in the regions, they are integrated, they are working, and they are helping us keep our manufacturing capacity within the regions. And once again, manufacturing is one of the main contributors to GDP in Quebec. It is a strong sector that employs people around the province. Good wages are paid. So if we want to keep that, the government will have to consider different solutions to help manufacturers. And it's not the only solution, but one of the solutions will be immigration for sure.
So I want to go back, Mrs. PROULX, to something we all heard and were appalled when we heard it from the then immigration minister. This is Jean Boulet saying that, all immigrants end up coming to Montreal. You're describing a situation where you visited people across the province. Is there a concern that too many of them end up here, or is that simply not the case?
I would say that what we've seen is when that newly immigrants arrive in Montreal, it's more difficult to have them after that move to the different regions, even though if there are some job opportunities. And this is why, if I go back to the foreign temporary workers, they are already in the different regions of Quebec. They've been there for a year, 2 years, and it would probably be easier to have them. If we were to give them access to permanent immigration, it would probably be easier to keep them in the regions where we do have needs, as well as in Montreal. But in the regions, labor shortages are affecting many, many companies.
That's interesting. That's almost like creating a rule that if you were to come here and we were to raise those immigration limits, that, you will have to go, like we did with doctors at some point, saying, we don't need you in Montreal, we need you in the regions. Is that something that could be done?
Well, there could be some incentives. One of our recommendations to the government was to put an incentive in place. So $10,000 per year for 2 years. Non-taxable for a newly arrived immigrant who wants to go in a region. And it's the same thing as you have for police, for instance. You have you'll have an incentive, and prime d'éloignement, that they call, so to establish yourself in foreign regions. There are tax credits for students that just finished for them to go work in the region. So it could be feasible for newly arrived immigrants that come to Montreal to give them an incentive to go try it out in a region to see how they integrate, how they feel about it, and if they want to stay there.
And then maybe fast track that process if they do want to stay there so they can more easily. Now, how is this going to come to fruition, though? Because, Legault does not seem on board. How do you convince, or do you think it's just going to become inevitable with the labor crisis that he's going to have to?
I think it will be inevitable because not only for manufacturing, but for the other sectors, once again, it's becoming an issue everywhere. Everybody you'll speak to will talk about labor shortages, how challenging it is to have access to the workers they need. It's true in transportation, in the public sector, in the service sectors. So at some point, there will have to be solutions put on the table. And of course, in manufacturing, we have to invest more to increase our productivity. We need to install more robots in our facilities so that we can do more with less people, but we're always going to need people. We're always going to need people to work in our plants and through the different regions as well.
VÉRONIQUE PROULX, CEO of the Manufacturers and Exporters Association of Quebec, reacting to those immigration numbers from the federal government. Ms. PROULX, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.